Welcome to Royally Unfiltered, the show that takes you behind palace gates like never before. This week, helping me tackle all the biggest headlines is author of The Windsor Legacy, Robert Jobson, and former press secretary to the late Queen Elizabeth II and King Charles III, Dickie Arbiter. Dickie and I were just talking about how excited we are for Windsor Legacy, November 6th in the UK, January the 6th, 2026 in the US. Can you give us a little taste, give us a little tease?
Well, actually, I started working on it a long time ago. It was an idea that I wanted to mark the 100th anniversary of the Queen's birth. And then you start going through all the things that have happened, in that time. And, and I'm a bit of a history buff, really. And then you start with the scandals and it develops, but then you bring it right up to date where there are quite a number of new revelations. But yeah, I think I'm quite excited about it, actually. I really, really enjoyed writing it. I really enjoyed researching it, and have found some pretty interesting stories that haven't been on the world stage before. So it'd be one of those ones that Dickie would be reading if he was a press officer all those years ago, but we say, no, we don't comment on books.
I'll still read it, Robert. I'll still read it. And it's something probably long overdue, but the 100th anniversary is a good peg. And you lived through a lot of it.
Well, that's the thing that's quite interesting for me, Dickie, is that I've covered the Royals now probably 30, 35 years or so. And so a third of the book, it's like you've got the historic side, and then you've got the perspective of living through it, through the times which a lot of people now look back at, the years that we were both on the road together, as history. Diana, the years and all the things in the 90s that were quite momentous, to say the least, are history, really. So, and it is quite strange having that perspective in the book. And then also when you start reflecting upon things from that experience, you look back at the things before that, the Townsend and Margaret crisis, then you go back to the abdication and how the role that Queen Elizabeth played, the late Queen Elizabeth, Queen Mother played in sort of galvanizing the royal family in the aftermath of the abdication. It all becomes a little bit more condensed and a little bit you see it in a slightly how it's unraveling so quickly, and it's almost touchable. You can see that the way that the interesting things that are going through are very relevant to today, and there's a lot of repetition in the mistakes and also the things that they do right. But the book at the end is called, it's Secrets and Scandal. Of course, there's a bit of, it's quite punchy, but the key word there at the end is survival, because throughout all of this, despite all of the problems that they face, there's always a sort of a galvanizing spirit that makes them sort of keeps them going. And I think a lot of that was down to Queen Elizabeth. But then with the reflections going forward, you look forward, you think, who is the character that is going to make sure that these issues don't happen again? I mean, there's a big change in what's happened in such a short space of time between the loss of the Duke of Edinburgh, the loss of Queen Elizabeth II, to where we are now. And you hope that there will be a figure that will be the glue that keeps all this thing together. But you wonder where the character is. I mean, I think the loss of, what I found when I was writing this book was just how important the Duke of Edinburgh, the Prince Philip, was, I think, as a character for the latter part of the 20th and the early part of the 20th century, in really keeping the royal family together.
Sorry, Kinsey, we're keeping you out of this one. It's the characters in the past, isn't it, Rob?
Yeah.
And it's a bit characterless at the moment.
That's what I mean, the strength of character. You look at the characters of, say, the Duke of Edinburgh, I think was hugely important, and Queen Elizabeth, the Queen Mother, hugely important figures, both from outside the family, who really did galvanize and transform and help the royal family survive at a time when other royal families, I mean, when you look at the photographs that I've got in the book of, you go back only century and a half to the 19, the funeral of Edward VII, when all those kings and queens, and the funeral of Edward VII, so about 1910, all of those kings that were around Europe all together in this one photograph, and then all these different republics that formed straight away after the First World War, and the royal family in Britain survived. And you just wonder, where is this this, the duty and the galvanizing spirit that the Queen Mother instilled, that the Duke of Edinburgh instilled, that her late Queen Elizabeth instilled. There is an issue there, and I think that the royal family have got to be aware that you can't take it all for granted.
I want to make 2 points. First of all, you guys talking about Rob Job doing this for 35. Look at this baby.
I've eaten myself since then. It's terrible.
I remember him when he was like that.
But also, I wanted to say, based on what you just said, I feel like Catherine's could be the outsider that helps, strengthen.
Yeah, but I mean, I do, and I have a lot of admiration for Catherine. I think she could be, but you've got to look at the way that, I mean, I'm a massive admirer of Queen Elizabeth, the Queen Mother. I'm fortunate, like Dickie, to have met her, and she really had, when the chips were down, there she was, going to the East End, when there were people booing and throwing stones at the royal cars in the East End, during the Blitz, and she had the ability to communicate. She dressed so immaculately because she had to be seen. When the bomb hit Buckingham Palace, and she said, "We can now look the East End in the face." She had a real understanding of how important it was to connect with the people, and through hard work, she did that. When she went to Canada that time, when these two Scottish soldiers said to her, "Oh, are you now? What are you, Scottish or English?" She said, "Well, now I'm in Canada. I'm a Canadian. Now I'm in Quebec. I'm a Canadian." She had the ability to galvanize, I think, an institution that could have gone wrong after the abdication crisis. The Queen Mother was somebody who really could see the picture, and at a time when the monarchy was in a pretty not disarray, but in a vulnerable position. You had two kings alive, for example. You had Edward VIII writing his memoirs just close to the coronation of the Queen Elizabeth, and saying things about his brother that he shouldn't have been saying. George VI.
Sounds familiar.
Yeah, but this was right at the top of the tree.
That was a generation, though, wasn't it? Because you had the Queen Mother and Winston Churchill, both the greatest of great communicators. They were able to do it. They
worked together. The Queen Mother and Churchill very much in cahoots. It's fascinating when you start digging through the history and then watching that crisis unfold. Then you watch the Margaret and Townsend crisis and there that was happened, and then the one that both Dickie and I were very much on the ground and watching it run with Charles and Diana. You see the similarities in some of these crises, because I mean, the key players really were, of the last 150 years, were probably the most important people would have been the Duke of Windsor, I think, in terms of being the glamour boy. Then you had the Queen Mother, and then you had Diana. These were the three major characters, and it was the Queen Mother that really, I think, really was the one who was the great survivor in many ways, not just because of her longevity, because of what she achieved in her life.
Dickie, Rob Job mentioned this series of horrific events, Charles and Diana, Princess Margaret, Peter Townsend. We do see a cycle with Harry and Meghan. Has social media heightened things, a crisis for the royal family? Does social media heighten it today like it wasn't before? I mean, do we over exaggerate when things are bad with Harry and Meghan because the internet is talking?
Social media has heightened it for everybody. You say the wrong thing on social media in the UK and you get arrested.
That's true.
Not the wrong thing. It might have been something that we probably said 2 years ago, but you can't say it today. It's gone bonkers here. So social media has a lot to play in terms of what goes wrong in this country, what is going wrong, not necessarily wrong with the royal family. I mean, take Catherine. Last year, she released the video to say she had cancer. What happened beforehand? Social media went completely over the top and accusing her of faking it, accusing William and Catherine going to the Windsor farm shop, and the body of Catherine was a body double. I mean, she was absolutely pilloried. And then when she announced that she had a cancer on video, it all went quiet. But, these things have a habit. You said cycle a moment ago. These things have a habit of resurrecting again. And I hate to see that happen. But as long as we have social media, that is something that we've got to expect.
You've got to also remember, Kinsey, you go back to a crisis like the abdication crisis. The press barons of the Rothermeres and Beaverbrook were controlling everything in the UK to the extent that there were literally any American newspapers and magazines that would feature the story of Wallis Simpson and then Prince of Wales, or then when he became king, had sections of them cut out.
That was a lot of work for somebody.
Yeah, and they were people, they didn't, and they controlled it. They completely controlled it, because the Beaverbrook and of the Daily Express and Rothermere of the Mail, they controlled the media. So they didn't. The people of this country didn't really know an awful lot about what was going on with Wallis Simpson, and they did in society, but not the general people. So it was, in a way, it backfired, because it was quite a shock when it emerged that the whole abdication crisis unfolded. It was a very small window from them knowing about the affair to the moment he abdicated, and that was because of a lack of information. I mean, I think that we've noticed. I mean, I meant to say, when I looked like that little picture, but there were no mobile phones. There were nobody holding up phones. There was nobody. People were standing there patiently waiting to meet the royal family. Yeah, there'll be the occasional camera, but that wasn't seen in the crowd. Now you go with the royal family on engagement, there's just an army of people videoing. So no one's actually watching what's going on or interacting.
Everybody is potential paparazzi, because they've got a smartphone, because they've got a camera. They click something, and if they think it's controversial, they'll wing it to a newspaper. They'll ring it to a news agency. They'll put it on social media before anything else. You can't say anything before it goes round the world in a nanosecond.
I mean, it must be. I mean, I would think it would add an awful lot to the work that the communications guys have to worry about. But we've only recently seen, haven't we, how that worked. And this was a photographer, but it was taken on a mobile phone, of the picture of the press secretary with Harry's press secretary sitting on the balcony of the Royal Overseas League. I mean, I was there on the same balcony the other day. The reality is, everybody is a paparazzi, and the royal family have to be doubly on guard, because it's not only just a photograph, it's a video. But then we have the advantage of being, years ago, this would have been trying to organize this event that we're doing with you in America, and us doing different places. We'd have had to have film crews. We've all had to be in a certain place. We could never get the freedom of conversations, or the amount of I think really quite quality programs like this out there, because you just wouldn't have the facilities, and the finance involved would be too much. So there have been advantages in terms of talking about and sharing information. I think what the Queen Elizabeth, the Queen Mother, had an amazing ability right up until the last moments. Dickie was at the palace, and we had been there watching when it was her 100th birthday, for example. Her ability to connect with people was really quite strange, actually. There was a real love.
Was there any alcohol involved?
A lot of alcohol involved, but I need alcohol, to be 100 years old and still be sort of, putting a smile on her face. But I remember saying that to her. I met her at her, I think it was the Prince of Wales's 50th party at Buckingham Palace, and there was a lot of press invited. I don't know why they let us in, frankly, but we were all in there and talking to various people. I remember talking to the Queen Elizabeth, the Queen Mother, and she said, when I said I was going to go to sort of Saudi or something like that, she said, "Oh, we don't want to go there." I said, "Oh, really?" I thought this is going to be a story. It was some political moment. And she said, "Oh, you won't want to go there. It's dry." And I'm thinking, I said, and I immediately trying to be polite. I said, "Oh, yeah, it is rather hot." She said, "No, dry, man, dry."
That's hilarious.
She's a witty, very clever, very talented lady, an artist, and had a massive influence over the Prince of Wales, over the King, His Majesty.
You mentioned her 100th birthday. I remember her 100th birthday well, and she asked me, could I arrange a photograph of her team? I thought, yeah, easy. Get the Press Association. They were there. And at the end of the photograph, she walked over to me and she said, now this lady's 100, right? Yeah. She said, "Is that a digital camera?" I said, "Yes, ma'am." "Could I see the pictures then?"
Oh.
She was 100% aware of what was actually going on and what was new in technology.
That's so cute. I guess my question, based on Rob's description of the Queen Mother, is, and this question's for you, Dickie. Catherine always plays by the rules. She's such a team player. Might we see more from her when she does become queen? Is she allowing not only Queen Elizabeth, but also Queen Camilla to have their time to shine? Is she just waiting in line before we might see, some silly moments from her, like the Queen Mother talking about how dry certain places are? I just sometimes wonder, if Prince William's incredibly protective of her because of Princess Diana, so we might not see as much much of her as we'd like to, or B, if she's just patiently waiting and allowing others to shine.
I think what's happening is that before it was announced last year that she had cancer, she was moving forward quite well, and she was communicating incredibly well with people, very much on the engagement front, or it was something happening in Kensington Palace. She's a good communicator. And then this cancer scare knocked her for six. So it set her back. And I think she's edging her way slowly back into the sort of the royal engagement fold. And we probably will see more. When you see her out and about at engagements with people, she's very animated. She's not necessarily spontaneous on the hoof.
Yeah.
We saw Queen Mother always pretty spontaneous, and other members of the royal family, but she's not quite spontaneous. And I think it's maybe a bit of a lack of confidence, or aware of her position, not putting her foot wrong, not saying the wrong thing, because things are picked up very quickly. You can whisper something and it's picked up, and before you know it, it's on the internet, it's on social media. So I think she's treading very carefully until she feels in herself that she is 100% okay, ready to go out and do the job full time, rather than what she's doing at the moment, slightly part time.
I mean, she was out and about today with William, and again, it seemed all that people seem to be talking about is her hair. Is it too long? Is it this? Is it that? Is it blonde? Is it not? It's ridiculous, really, where the woman's just been through what she's been through. But I think that Dickie hit the nail bang on the head there. It's about confidence, and I think that she's always going to be quite a careful person. Some people, I don't know if it's their background, whatever. I don't know, but she's obviously in this age that we live in, where everything is filmed and you're conscious of it. But people like the Queen Mother, I don't think she would have been particularly bothered by what was on around her. She was, she would have been saying what she was going to say. And I think that she did things like she was the one who went and got the speech therapist for her husband. She had a confidence, inherent confidence about her.
Interesting what you're saying. Interesting what you're saying, Rob, about Catherine. The concentration on her hair. It's long. Is it blonde? Is it this? Is it that? You wind the clock back and you go to the early 1980s, and Diana, the first 3 or 4 years, nobody focused on what she was doing. It was about what she was wearing. Dresses above the knee, below the knee.
Inevitable, though, really, is that we knew that. But I think also, Dickie, with that, it's funny because Sam McKnight is quoted today saying, look, a woman's hair is very important, for their confidence. It's like her armor or whatever. But she's also conscious that she's on the cusp of, we don't, let's hope that the king lives for many, many years. But they know that they're on the cusp of another role that will be the king and queen. And that role would involve being effectively, you're effectively owned by the state. Your time with your children is going to be less. So they're conscious, I think, that they want to engage as much as they can as a family at this moment in time, whilst not reneging on their duty, but at the same time just spend as much time in those formative years with the children, because the children are still quite young. So I think that's a very difficult balance, but they know that at some stage that's sort of going to be taken from them in a way, because
you've actually hit the nail on the head. You've hit the nail on the head, engaging with their children. This is something that Queen Elizabeth and Prince Philip didn't have. Charles was very young when the coronation happened. They were off for 6 months. The kids were left behind, and it was very difficult. William and Catherine at least have had that cushion of the years together, the years bringing up a family. And as you rightly say, let's hope the king has many years ahead of him. And it gives William and Catherine more years as a family, because once that happens, the inevitable happens, the family will take second place. It's
Oof.
Well, you
inevitable.
only have to look, don't you, Dickie? I mean, I did a lot with this book, you know, the Windsor Legacy. You look at the impact of becoming king on George VI. This was a very much a family man, as the Duke of York, his two young daughters, we four, him and Elizabeth. You know, they did their royal duties, but at the same time, they were very much a loving family unit, and that did continue. But it took its toll on the king. Yes, there was the war, of course, and that really did. He led us through the Second World War, and it effectively killed him. But he was actually around William's age now when he became king. He was only 41 when he became king, and it's hard to believe. But he was 56 when he died. You know, he was, and he looked so much older because of the impact. It's almost like you look at those pictures, Lincoln before and after the Civil War. You know, the impact on our king, George VI, was huge. I mean, and that was not only the war, but that was just the stress of a man with this speech impediment and a lack of confidence in leading a nation and being the king. And I think that, you know, you got to look that he was the same age, you know, around about William's age when he became king. And so a lot of pressure is going to be on both of them. And I think that's probably where Catherine's very wise, and they're very wise in trying to keep their lives private in as much as they can with their family and separate. This house they're going to Forest Lodge, I think, is because they want to have a family. It's not a small house by any means, but it's not a palace, and it's not a huge stately home. It's comfortable. It's a nice property, but it is a place where they can be with their family. And I think, it's not like long corridors and things like that. I think it's very important to William that he has a family unit, and I think he will fight tooth and nail about, even if he is king, to maintain that level of privacy. It'd be more difficult though.
Dickie, I already forgot the word. I was trying to hold on to the word, but it's something to do with mystique. Robert talking about how there's some mystery when it comes to Catherine. I wonder historically if we'll look back. Yes, yes. I wonder if historically we'll look back on Catherine and see that could potentially have been a strength all along, a hidden strength, compared to Harry and Meghan, who are oversharing so much, and it's almost cheapened them and made them less valuable. The mystery that surrounds Catherine, I think, is compelling. It makes me more invested in her. It makes me more invested in her family. I mean, I'm much more interested in what she's reading over what her hair, the length of her hair, or her hair color, or what she stopped to look at today at the museum. That would be much more interesting for me to know. But the mystery that surrounds her, I think, is one of the strengths of the royal family in general. Do you agree?
Yeah, I do agree. And if you go back to the 19th century, historian, journalist, entrepreneur, you name it, he did everything, Walter Bagot, he said, do not let daylight in on the magic. And I don't think Catherine is letting daylight in at the moment, nor should she let daylight in. The Queen Mother, as Rob was talking about earlier, she didn't let daylight in at all. It's only with the advent of mass television, with photographers, with social media, and particularly with Charles and Diana's marriage in 1981, that brought out a sort of anything goes syndrome in terms of the press. They could photograph anything, they could write anything. And this is how it went. And I think Catherine is keeping a bit of that mystique back so that when the day does come, and it will come, hopefully later rather than sooner, that she's got a bit of ammunition in her pocket that if she lets go a little bit, people will say, gosh, that's something new. That's something completely new. You don't want all the ammunition fired now. You want the mystique to be maintained. How long it can be maintained, that remains to be seen.
I
think
go ahead.
So you were saying, Kinsey, about what she would be looking at the museum. She's a very smart lady. I think this is a lot of people it can be lost in the way we look at her. But you know, academically, a very smart woman. When she went to Harvard in Boston on a visit, she was in that room with all of these top academics about early child learning, early care, all of these things, professors, people that have been in the industry and they were completely and utterly bamboozled by it. They said she always brings her A game to the table. She totally researches to the point that, well, that's what we don't really see behind the scenes. And that comes back to, I think, her relationship with her dad, because when she was at university, he was really interested in current affairs and would send her up newspaper clippings of particular things that she should read. He thinks she should read this, and I think that's and then she'd be sitting in the the common room, whatever, going through all these things that her dad had set up. So I think that her background is very studious, it's very sharp, and she doesn't. It's not about letting the sun out. I think she wants to always bring her A game to the table. Now that can't be a bad thing. I think that shows you that. Also, when William, who is a guy that's when he first started out doing his public speaking. Dickie is as a professional presenter. He wasn't that good. He wasn't very good at the beginning. William, Harry was a far better.
Even Diana did lessons, right? Like I don't think everybody kind of.
No, but Harry was a very much a natural on stage when he was doing his speeches, and he's been improved an awful lot. But I think that's because she. Was been much. They have conversations, but you can see them before he's going on to delivery speech. They're always talking and communicating, and that's where I think that there's that hidden strength behind the crown, as that you're talking about with the Queen Mother and similarity to her, who would always be squeezing the hand of the Duke of York as the King George VI, when he was lacking confidence. So I think there is that strength in that, but they don't do it very loudly. They're very much as one. The couple, William and Catherine. I think her strength is in being the power behind the throne, rather like I think Prince Philip, hugely important character, and in making sure that all the troops did as they were told, and no one would take advantage of the Queen. But the Queen then could be the one that the light shined on, and that's I think what her role will be. Except for, of course, she's such a beautiful lady that the media will want to sort of twist it a little bit, rather than like they did with that, twist it a little bit, twist it a lot to shine on her, when really all she wants to do is promote her husband as the future king.
I promise, Dickie, this is my last question about Catherine. I promise. I was watching an interview with an actor who's everywhere right now, and he said something that I thought. Probably, I was like, I bet the royal family feels this way. He said he's a new actor who has blown up, and he said it's hard for me to process all of these people feeling like they own me. And I thought, I wonder if Catherine ever felt that way or ever feels that way. And it's different with the royal family. People pay taxes so that they, there are I think it's fair for some people to feel like they have a relationship with the royal family when they have to pay for them. But after a year of her being tormented online, people accusing her of a Brazilian butt lift, I think it says a lot that she does continue to show up, and she does continue to give herself to the public and give herself to this life of service, because I don't know if I could do that. I think I'd be really resentful towards what I had to deal with in 2024.
Interesting what you're saying. When Catherine married William, look, they'd had a relationship for almost 10 years. They had a little blip on the way when they parted ways, but it wasn't for long. When they married, Catherine knew exactly what she was signing up for. So it didn't come, and hasn't or shouldn't have come, as a surprise in the way that people feel that they own the royal family. Yes, you mentioned taxes. Push that aside. People feel that they're our royal family. They represent us. We do own them. And Catherine was fully aware that that was what was going to be about in her time with William. And it continues today. People do feel that. You see the King out on the road yesterday, Camilla out on the road yesterday. People feel that they own the royal family. In fact, is owning the royal family talking to them? No, it isn't. It's being a part of them. You relish that few moments. Rob will bear that out. Talking to the Queen, talking to the Queen Mother. It's a wow moment because you don't actually expect it, but then they come up and they talk to you, and it is a wow moment. So people feel that they might own the royal family. The royal family might feel the same as well, but it's part of the job. It goes with the territory. It's what they've signed up for.
Yeah, what Dickie is saying is absolutely right. I think the Queen, the Queen's father, George, said to the Queen, remember, every time you speak to somebody, they will remember that for the rest of your life. You won't remember them, but every time you speak to somebody and have a conversation, that's something they'll be repeating time and time again, wherever they are in the world, until the day they die, And so that's always very important not to, just to be flippant, to be focused all the time. And I think you find with William and Catherine in particular, and His Majesty the King and Camilla, they do that very, very well. I think they really do connect. And even Prince Andrew, when he was at Sandringham not that long ago, he was chatting away with the people of the public. They still want to speak to, they still want to have that communication, and they will remember it.
Dickie, over the weekend, we heard a new story about Queen Camilla, that she was allegedly assaulted and fought her attacker off with her high heel. This story inspired Boris Johnson to open 3 rape crisis centers in London. It's from Valentine Low's new book. It's called Power and the Palace, the inside story of the monarchy. I felt a bit of guilt repeating this story because it feels like this is something she should be telling us. Although I think that the end result, these crisis centers, it's important to acknowledge that she inspired them. Do you understand? Do you understand my thought process there?
I do understand your thought process, and yes, she inspired them. She's very passionate about women suffering sexual violence, and the fact that she got on with Boris Johnson and his desire to open rape centres in 3 parts of the capital of London was testimony to his conversation with her and what she said to him. Now, the fact that as a 16 or 17-year-old, we're going back now to the mid 1960s, where she was on a train and some guy was trying to fumble her. And what did she do? Well, she took her shoe off and hit him. Pardon to your American viewers, hit him in the nuts. That was exactly what she would have said. She is what you get. She's not backward in coming forward. She says it as it is. She's very passionate about when she talks to people, that she's talking to an individual. She's looking at that person in the eyes. They are the most important person in the room. She's not looking over their shoulder to somebody who might be more important or more interesting. So she's a very down-to-earth person. She hasn't changed since she became queen. She hasn't changed since she married Charles when he was Prince of Wales. She is Camilla, the Camilla Parker Bowles that we knew, married to Andrew Parker Bowles. People say to me time and time again, how is it she's able to communicate so well? Very simply, when she was a commander's wife, she had to deal with the troubles, the family troubles, under her husband's command. And that's why she was so passionate about these sexual violence organizations, because she heard a lot about it when she was an army commander's wife. Because troopies are not as good as gold. They sometimes hit their wives, beat them up, and it happens. It's a way of life today, unfortunately. And as long as she can spearhead it, people would do something about it. If you don't get somebody high profile in that role, then people will just ignore it and sweep it under the carpet. It's a way of life today. It's a fact of life today. And it's good on her that she's taken it on board.
Gabo, it's one of those, it's not a cause that allows you the photos with the sweet puppy dogs. And it's a tough cause. I think it's really courageous of Queen Camilla to make this one of her legacies when, it's not going to result in beautiful, shiny pictures, glossy pictures.
Well, she did a very good documentary in which there were a number of these women who were as a result of sexual violence, and she wasn't backward in coming forward in talking to them or talking about it. And that's very important. I'm sure Rob will agree with that.
Absolutely. I think it's good, actually, that her role being Queen Camilla and as previous Duchess of Cornwall talking about this, she had the advantage, I think, really, it's a very taboo subject, domestic violence, when it was, and she's been able to focus attention on it because people were going to listen. Diana took on major subjects that were really taboo at the time, from AIDS to leprosy mission to all of these things, very, very difficult subjects. and I don't think, as one of the press at the time, we really focused enough on the real issues. So we focused, as Dickie was saying, on on her and what she was wearing, what she was doing. Doesn't she look wonderful cuddling this little child, whatever? But we didn't really explain the issues, I think, and it's a mistake that it's just the way the media was at the time, and we were all part. I was part of that that beast, if you like. And I look now. I think the advantage the Queen has got is that she's not seen, we're not there to, so what going on about what she's wearing. She's not this young, glamorous woman. She's someone that when she speaks, you listen. And I think that is an advantage to her, because I think that other members of the royal family take on incredibly difficult subjects. Sophie Wessex, was Edinburgh now, the Duchess of Edinburgh, really take some tough issues. And they are listened to, but not in the same way as the Queen. I think the fact that it's the Queen Camilla, it does make a big difference. And she's got great traction in some of the more popular papers, like the Daily Mail, have written she's written op-eds in the Daily Mail about it and things like that. So I think all of this is helping give us a better picture of who Camilla is. And I think she's an incredibly interesting and well-grounded person. What Dickie says about the soldiers, they're coming back from war, a lot of them traumatized, and the violence and the problems that go on. She had first-hand experience of that, and I think that she's brought that to the table, and she should be really commended for it, because I think that, in all honesty, she will be saving lives.
That's a very good point. I agree with you that she will be saving lives. I think that both of you might, Rob Job, I don't know where you stand on this, but Dickie, do you agree with me that there is no royal reunion happening come September 8th between King Charles and Prince Harry? I'm so sick of having to field this question. I'm like, no, that's very silly that we're building up. Everybody's going to be disappointed, anticlimactic, lack of reunion.
I don't believe for a moment there's going to be a reunion, because quite frankly, Harry can't be trusted. As soon as somebody says something to him, it's all over the American networks.
Yeah.
Blink, and it's all over the networks. And until that trust is restored, he has to prove that he is trustworthy. And at the moment, there is no sign of that proof. It's all very well coming over to support one of your charities. Good on him. I applaud him on that. But don't expect Dad to open the door, welcome you with open arms, because quite frankly, at the moment, he can't trust him. Can't trust him not to go and blab to somebody, and somebody will pass it on and on and on. And then the story gets mixed up, and it's who says what, who says nothing. It's a very difficult one. So I don't see a reunion at all.
Jobson, and the last thing we heard from Harry was, I don't know how much longer my father has to live. And on top of what Dickie just said, Meghan this week has been drip feeding People magazine news stories every single day, whether it's parenting tips or she sent some influencer boxes to some of her fans. I mean, Meghan is clearly in direct contact with People magazine this week. If there was really a royal reunion on the horizon, I feel like everybody would have been really quiet, and it would have been a sneak attack. But I just don't see.
Well, as a dad, and Dickie knows, as a dad, you forgive your children a lot. But I think that you've got to remember here. I mean, the king is he's been treated with chemotherapy. He's got a state visit coming up with Donald Trump. That's a huge moment historically for his reign and for his role, which is very important. He's in Scotland most of this time, so if Harry's going to see him, the mountain will have to go to Mohammed. So the bottom line is, I think that there's no, if they think they're going to be sort of joining up together in London, some of that's not going to happen. Now, for him to get there, Harry, without being seen and without creating a big fuss, which is the last thing His Majesty needs at the moment, is fuss. He needs calm, and he needs to be able to rest in between big moments. He's got to get to Scotland, and he's got to get there. He's going to be not seen at the airport. He's going to have to get. There'll be people following him across to Balmoral or Berkeley. It'll be a complete fiasco. So, the one thing I would also add is that you've got to remember, it's not. As a dad, I'd probably forgive my son most things. I just probably would. But when you've got another son that's really very important in terms of the future of the institution you serve, and you've got your son Harry has said such vicious things about about your wife, you know, saying that she was dangerous and that and all the things that he said about Camilla were really quite bad. You know, like we didn't want him to marry her. She was
Wicked
the
stepmother.
wicked stepmother. All these things, you know, they're not really forgivable actually in the long term. And it's difficult then. It puts the king in this problem. The one thing I think is rather sad is that even if you wanted to see him, which I'm sure deep down a father wants to see his son, what are they going to discuss? You know, this guy's living miles away on the other side of the world. You know, I remember him emerging one of them. He said, "I'm not a bank." That was one of the last things that they had a conversation about. So it is going to come down to, you know, the nitty gritty. Oh, Dad, I don't know how long you've got left. You know, what's happening with the money? These are things that you don't really want to be discussing when you've got a state visit on the horizon, and then you've got your wife and brother, and you know all your wife and your other son saying, "Well, what did he say?" The fact that the lack of trust, absolutely. I mean, William's going nowhere near him. But what did he say? What can we expect? What's the next thing going to come out? Is there going to be another book? Is there a Meghan book? Harry has made his bed, and unfortunately, he's blurted everything everywhere. You can't suddenly just put everything back in and say, "Oh, let's start again." It's going to be impossible, I think.
You know, you put your finger on the pulse there with the king still undergoing chemotherapy. He's not 100% right, but he's doing a terrific job up and down the country.
Tiring, you know.
If he were to open the front door to Harry, Harry would dominate the conversation. And that is not something that the king would wish to happen. And at the end of it, he would say, "Well, where are we? What happens now?" And in answer to your question, Kinsey, it ain't going to happen.
That's right, Dickie. Well, one of the excuses I made, or one of the reasons I said I did not really feel like this would happen, and I'd like both of your opinions on this. This royal family is really great about remembering the people that got them there. You know, the death of the queen to some of us is sacred. And I don't feel, and Dickie, please disagree with me if you do, I don't feel like the king would want to interrupt a moment that the country would be taking to remember, you know, the queen's, you know, long life of service, just selflessness, with the type of petty gossip that a meeting with Prince Harry would bring. Because we would be talking about money, security, his multiple lawsuits against the media. You know, it would take away from a moment where we should be remembering somebody that was so unifying in Queen Elizabeth.
Yeah, you're absolutely right there. It is ironic that it is the 8th of September. Whether he is going to fly back to America straight after the charity engagement remains to be seen. I'm not aware of any plans that he is asked to see his father. And I think you're absolutely right in that most of us will cast our minds back to September the 8th, 2022, when late Queen Elizabeth II passed off from this world to the next. She was a unifying factor. She was there in times of crisis. She gave comforting words in times of crisis. Who can forget those words at the time of coronavirus? We will see our friends again. We will see our family again. We will meet again. People got a lot of comfort from that. And we don't want Harry interrupting our memories, our thoughts. If you want to do something, be serious about it. Don't try and peg it onto the fact that you're coming here anyway for an engagement. If you really want to do it, then you've got to make overtures. You've got to show a bit of contrition. You've got to apologize. You've got to promise that you're not going to spread it out to the media. And you've got to arrange it at a time when it's not convenient to you, but convenient to your father. You can't just drop in and expect him to drop everything, because that's not the way he works.
Ooh, that's such a good point. Jabo, season 2 of With Love, Meghan debuted how many weeks ago? Maybe 2 weeks ago now. It didn't make the list of Netflix's top 10 shows in the month of August. Forbes pointed out that this likely means that the series got fewer than 2.1 million viewers in its first week. By contrast, we saw season 1 in March. It had 2.6 million in the first week. landing, I think towards the end of the top 10. Are people just sick of Meghan Markle? Should she be worried about this? I've seen a lot less parody on social media regarding this new season, a lot less interest. And I think it could be great for her, because the more that the chatter, that becomes whispers, then maybe she does have a chance to do things behind the scenes. But I also think a lack of interest is a lack of interest.
Well, I think apathy is her biggest. That's something that she'll probably hate, but it's going to happen. See, the thing is, if they'd remained members of the royal family, there would have been the bubble that they were experiencing. And then when they were sort of holding a gun to the Queen's head and saying, "Where the stars," that would have worn down, you see. And that's what happens in the royal family. One minute you're King George, the next minute you're George King. And the fact is, but they would have still had their titles. They would have still carried on doing their jobs, and they would have had a purpose, something to do with the Commonwealth, things to do. They could then really spend their time getting on with things that matter. With Love Meghan, I'm surprised it gets 0.1, let alone 2.1. I mean, it really, and it's dwindling because people don't believe her. They don't really care what she thinks. Don't believe an awful lot of what she's doing. I mean, repackaging things and putting sprinkles on it doesn't really mean that you're changing the world. I think every time I watch these programs that anything to do with Harry, I think it's a terrible waste. I mean, he could have played a very important role alongside his father at VJ Day, and I thought that. I mean, one thing I must admit, that VJ Day with that 104-year-old army captain, 105-year-old army captain, was just the most moving thing when he said, he saluted my courageous king. But that's the sort of place where Harry should have been, in his uniform next to his father, showing the continuity and the importance of the role of the royal family and military. With Love Meghan, it's just so Kardashian and so nonsense. It just doesn't mean a lot to me. And I think if she does series 3, if she ever gets there, it will be pushing towards 1.1 or 0.1. I don't think there's going to be a great deal of success in it. But she has traction in these things. This is the sort of thing she was doing before, and this is what she does. It's not that she's changed. It's that her profile's changed because she married into the royal family. But this is what she does.
Kinsey, you pointed out that she had over 2 million views. When you think that Netflix has got over 300 million subscribers, multiply that by about 5, the number of viewers. But just over 2 million is a pinprick.
I mean, that you could say something salacious on YouTube and have over 2 million, hits overnight. Do you know what I'm saying? Like that.
Don't do it, Dickie. Don't say anything salacious.
Do it, Dickie. I want Dickie to teach us how to pack our luggage, which is what she does when she's going on a trip with her Pilates instructor. She teaches us how to pack our luggage. I'm like, who doesn't know how to pack luggage?
It's unbelievable.
Who cares?
Who cares? I actually sacrificed quite a bit of time watching those 8 episodes. And then I asked myself at the end, why? Well, why? Because here I am talking to you. I don't like lifestyle programs. I don't like cookery programs. I don't like reality TV programs. And I didn't like With Love Meghan. I didn't.
And you don't really like Meghan Markle either.
I didn't understand a word anybody was saying because they were all giggling. They were all shouting at each other. And quite frankly, it has limited appeal. I think the appeal is, quite frankly, your side of the pond rather than ours, and maybe elsewhere in the world, maybe Australia, but it has no appeal in this country.
Dickie, isn't it annoying to you, though, that you're right, she's trying to appeal to an American audience. However, it's like cultural appropriation, because she's like, here's my favorite tea that I tried in London. What you hate that, I don't think she'll ever go back there. I don't think she'll ever.
Well, she'll never come back here.
She rejects the royal family. She rejects the system, but she wants us to all have tea and crumpets. And isn't that a little strange?
She trashes the system and trashes the royal family and says everything about it was dreadful. And then she calls them racist, calls them that, and then starts drinking her tea with a little pinky finger sticking out. The whole thing is just, It's
You know, the
just
sadness,
kind of terrible. Really.
the sadness of it all is no, she won't come back to the United Kingdom. But what is really sad is I doubt she will let her children come to the United Kingdom.
With
And
their
that is a great
titles,
sadness for
with
the
their
royal family.
HRH, with their titles. There is no reason for those children to live in the United States of America and be a prince and a princess and an HRH on their passports. It's
And there
so
is no reason for them to have those titles at all, in my
it's
opinion.
so ludicrous, and it shows you how, I mean, to me, it's all money driven. It's greedy. They want those titles and the everything so that their children will have more opportunities financially. It has nothing to do with relationships with the family. Otherwise, Prince George would know his cousins. I don't even think that George, Charlotte, and Louis have met Lily.
They wouldn't recognize her in the street.
No,
They
no.
want their cake and eat it, don't they? They turn their back on the royal family, but they still want the titles. They don't want to be part of the royal family, but they still want the titles. And quite frankly, the titles are quite meaningless in the States because you people are not really into titles, are you? It probably looks good on a passport. Probably looks good when you go to a hamburger joint saying, "Oh, my name's HRH Archie." And somebody will say, "Well, what does that mean?"
Well, given that America started its independence and they turned it over tea and titles, I think they wanted to get rid of a king, and there was a big fight over some tea in Boston. So I think that it's probably the wrong two things to be pushing if you're Meghan Markle. But
Well,
no, I think that
they're in this shallow land of Hollywood where
they're monetizing. They're monetizing.
Yeah.
But I don't think I think that William should actually do. I mean, there's a lot of things going on in Norway and Sweden. They're taking titles away. They realise that you can't have this extended royal family, and so they're focusing. And I know that those royal family, although they are cousins of our royal family, aren't the same. But I think that should happen when William becomes king. I think you should just take them away. I think it's just ridiculous, honestly. Yeah, Harry was born a prince. He'll always be a prince. But I think that the fact that they've gone on like this, I think they're not working royals. The Duke and Duchess of Sussex thing should have been taken away, in my opinion. They rejected it. They don't want to. They didn't want to be members of the royal family. But you can't have your tea, your cake, and everything and eat it, as Dickie says. And I think you can't trade on it. That was one of the deals. Yeah, they are.
Dickie, last question to you, off of what Robert said. If Harry continues to spiral in his charity situation, today it was reported that there are people within Invictus that don't believe that he's a strength anymore, that believe he's more of a weakness. We heard Senabale say he's become a liability. If Harry continues to spiral when it comes to these incredible charities that the royal family helped him build, can you see Prince William stepping up and saying, you know what, I don't think that title is necessary. This is a slimmed down monarchy. I just want people that represent us representing us.
It's something that he could say once he becomes sovereign. He certainly can't do it now.
Right.
That is in the bailiwick of his father, the King Charles.
Which I don't think the king would ever do. King Charles.
The king will never do it. He's got far more important things to do. It's a bit like asking Parliament, the British Parliament, to remove the Sussex title. They've got more important things to do. The country is imploding. The last thing they're going to think about is removing a Sussex title. The people of Sussex might wish the title to be removed.
They voted for it.
That's another story altogether. But no, in the fullness of time, when William does become king, if what the Sussexes do now continues when William becomes king, and hopefully we're talking about 20 years hence, then it's conceivable that William will have the titles removed. Certainly remove the HRH. That is a nonsense for two kings.
Well, if you think about it, the HRH, and it still annoys me to this day that the HRH was taken from Diana, Princess of Wales. So his mother had her HRH taken away, and yet Meghan Markle is HRH. I think that must be a bit galling for William.
Yeah, but Jobbo, we all know she's the driving force. She snaps her fingers and he jumps.
Well, we think that. I think a lot of the blame. We blame Meghan a lot. I think that a lot of this is driven through Harry's sort of paranoia and his hatred of the press, and I think that a lot of it is driven from Harry. You only have to read that spare. I read it. Obviously, we both read it at the beginning, but when you read it slowly and you read it, and it's almost like he's laying on a couch, just sort of unloading all his life to a psychiatrist. I think he's got a lot of issues that he has never resolved ever since he was a young kid, and we all, obviously mourned with him when his mother was so tragically taken away from us. But at the same time, I think that he has got so many issues that are unresolved. And he sort of, and she plays along with it. I think. I mean, I don't know where they're going to end up, in their lives, but I think he will end up quite a lost soul without her.
Well, that's sad, but I don't know who he was talking to when he wrote about the Elizabeth Arden cream on his Todger. I don't know who he was talking to, okay? Because none of us asked for that information. That is what I would consider an overshare.
Well, he certainly must have been talking to his ghostwriter, who should have been a bit more. Who should have been a little bit fairer and not included it.
Amen.
I think the ghostwriters are important, but the editors of that book really did need. I mean, all the stuff about him losing his virginity in the field, we didn't really need to know it all.
Amen.
I think the editors,
yeah, exactly.
There was like, but the Todger and the Creek. I mean, that frankly was like, please, someone edit this.
Yes, please. Let's
edit the book. That's
delete.
fine in your first draft, but
all right, author
we
of
actually don't want to know.
a book that does not include the word Todger, The Windsor Legacy by Robert Jobson.
It certainly doesn't.
November 6th if you're in the UK. January.
It does not include that. It tries to start to be a historic work, but then it does get into the nitty-gritty, and there are some fun stories in there that I can tell you when you're going to enjoy reading, and I was quite surprised at when I discovered them. Yeah.
All right, you'll come back and talk about those.
Robbo, the publicity invoice is in the post.
And
I will sponsor any of your next swims, runs, whatever you're doing.
Yeah, well, I'm riding Saturday week, so you've got the link.
Yeah, I will make sure that we'll keep you going. Yeah, absolutely.
And former press secretary to the late Queen Elizabeth II and King Charles III, Dickie Arbiter. Again, Robert Jobson, thank you so much for a fun chat. Agree with us, disagree with us, let us know in the comments below. Make sure you like, subscribe, and share this video with a friend. Thanks, everyone.